Imagine you're driving home at night in Benin City sometime in 1986. The roads are really quiet, street light flickers in the distance. Then suddenly, a car just appears, just double crossing you. You slow down a little bit because you're trying to be safe. Before you can even react, men step out of the darkness with guns. There is shouting. Someone yells at you to stop the car and get out of the car. These were the accounts of many victims who survived attacks like this during the 1980s. Within seconds, victims were surrounded. Money, cars, and valuables were taken. Sometimes, the attackers even fired their weapons, killing victims and injuring some. The name people began to whisper after these robberies were always the same: Lawrence Anini. Who was Lawrence Anini? Lawrence Anini was a notorious armed robber who operated mainly in Benin City in Edo State, Nigeria, during the 1980s. Between 1986 and 1987, his gang carried out a series of violent robberies, hijacking, killings that terrorized residents of the city and the surrounding areas. At the time, Nigeria was under military rule led by Ibrahim Babangida, and crimes like Anini quickly became national headlines. Because of how frequently the gang struck, the press began calling him the Law, a nickname that suggests he was untouchable. Anini did not operate alone. He had a gang which included several members, the most notable one being Monday Osumbo. They carried out highway robberies attacks. They attacked banks and hijacked vehicles of high net worth individuals. By 1986, the situation had become unbearable for many residents in Benin City. Robberies were happening on major roads more frequently. Drivers were being forced out of their cars at gunpoint. Some were attacked, and it even ends in shootings that kill or injure people. The press began to cover these crimes more heavily, and the name Lawrence Anini began to appear more frequently in the newspapers. Residents of Benin City started hearing violent robberies happening all across the city. Drivers on major roads were stopped at gunpoint. In one widely reported incident, the gang attacked the driver of a senior police officer. The victim, a driver named Albert Otwe, was killed during this hijacking, and his body was later discovered along Benin Abo Road months after. For many people in the city, this was a moment that they realized that the robberies had become something far more dangerous. Police officers were frequent targets of these attacks. Reports at the time said that most of the killing spree were targeted at police officers because he hated them, and there was a story about him having an inside person within the police force who told them where the roadblocks are and how to escape. Witnesses describe attacks that happened very quickly and violently, often leaving very little chance for victims to escape. Other reports also said that the robberies happened in broad daylight, and the gang sometimes threw money into the streets after operations. Crowd will gather to pick up the scattered cash, then will create chaos that will allow the robbers to escape. This strange scene also added the myth surrounding Anini. People even started believing that he was impossible to catch because of how he was escaping very quickly and always all the time. There was also incidents about letters that were distributed to business owners and managers. Let's say he wants to go for a robbery in a particular branch of a bank. He sends a letter to the bank manager telling them that they should prepare the money for him, that he's coming to rob them ahead of time. Many of them could not even go to report to the police. Many reportedly sought help from local traditional authorities because they saw that it seems like this person cannot be stopped because of how frequently he got away with it. Overall, there was pressure on the police to capture him. Authorities launched a major operation to track him down. Roadblocks were set up, suspected hideouts were being investigated. The manhunt for him became a national news. Eventually, in December 1986, police received information about his location. They moved in on the location to make the arrest. When the officers got to the location, they knocked on the door and a man calmly answered. It was Lawrence Anini himself, but then he told them that no, the man that they are looking for is still inside the house. When the officers were able to know that he was misleading them, he was already on the run, and they shot him on his ankle. They injured him, but he was eventually captured alive. And I am wondering, is there no picture to identify him? Why were they able to? Anyways, despite his escape attempt, he was caught. And during the struggle, they fired their weapons and a bullet struck his ankle. But finally, the man terrorizing Benin City for months has been caught. The trial for Lawrence Anini quickly became one of the most talked about criminal cases in Nigeria. For many Nigerians, it was hard to believe that the man who had caused so much fear had finally been caught. The arrest made national headlines all across Nigeria. Because the country was under military rule at the time, the case was handled by the military tribunal. People followed every development closely. For months, the public had heard stories about these robberies and the shootings and the letters and the fear that spread across Benin City. Now the man at the center of it all stood in court and was awaiting judgment. When the verdict was finally delivered, it was clear and final. Lawrence Anini and several of his gang members were sentenced to death. In 1987, the sentence was carried out. The crime spree that had terrorized the city has finally come to an end. Even decades later, the name Lawrence Anini is still remembered. It remains one of the most infamous criminal cases in this country's history. His story became a warning about organized crime and how it can grow if it goes unchecked. It also highlights the importance of accountability within law enforcement. For many Nigerians who lived through the 1980s, the memory of this period is still very vivid. Stories like this remind us of how quickly crime can spread fear throughout a community and how important it is that justice restores order. This has been another episode of Grim Stories, where we explore real cases from Nigeria and across Africa. If you found this story interesting, subscribe and turn on notification for more episodes, because sometimes the most unbelievable stories are the real ones.